morning, good afternoon, good evening, YouTube. It's your Slime King, the Demon Man, and welcome to the third episode in the series, Genshin Impact Comps You've Never Heard Of. Now, it's been a while since my last video about new comps, and that's simply because of the state of the game right now and the knowledge we have of Genshin. It is hard as hell to actually find a comp that works well, even in some niche scenarios that one, has actual good synergy, and two, actually works well with those synergies. As always, before we begin, let me just say that everything in this video is purely my opinion and you shouldn't take my word as law. So without further ado, it's time to unleash Cryzuha.
I love it when it snows.
Let's set things up with a little story I'd like to tell. This is the story of how Cryzuha was birthed into this world. If you care not for these trifles, then feel free to skip to the timestamp ahead. Continuing on, out of necessity and frustration against those damn Hydro Heralds and Triple Lectors, I needed to find a team that would both do well against them, so I need not switch teams every chamber. And freeze teams were the go-to. However, as you all know, I had none. I have skipped all the Cryo Limited 5 stars and only recently have I built my Kaya to meet his true potential. And luckily before this Abyss, I already had been testing a particular team. A team that focused solely on Kazuha's Cryo-infused normal attacks and freeze. Last Abyss, with the Rift Hounds, the Wolf Lords, and the Baptismal Bishops, weren't exactly the best place to try it out, so it was a horrible experience for this team all around. However, with the current iteration of the Abyss needing less DPS, needing freeze even more, and me finally getting a C6 Yunjin, this team was finally ready to be unleashed. Kazuha, Yunjin, Xinqiu, and Chongyun. An unlikely team that smells like so much copium. That will just be dismissed outright. But now that you know how this team came to be, I'll show you just how good this team can really be.
The world falls completely silent.
Now let's talk about how the hell this team works and the synergy behind it. Obviously, the whole crux of this team is Kazuha. With him being a Nemo and being able to apply VV, he consolidates so many roles. He is the main DPS, the debuffer, the buffer, and the crowd control at the same time. Yunjin serves to buff Kazuha's normal attacks to exorbitant degrees thanks to her crown burst and passive, breaking conventions. That is literally the epitome of what this team is, and it serves as a poetic symbolism as it is maxed because it is a rainbow team, and she also provides energy in Fav Lance. Xinqiu is the go-to off-field Hydro applicator that is your other source of DPS in this team. He provides damage reduction and heals for those pinches that you need it. And Chongyun allows Kazuha's attacks to become cryo, and under the frost field, it also decreases the cooldown of Kazuha's E, allowing you to spam it more. Speaking of Kazuha's E, his plunge from it allows you to shatter and deal some nice EM scale damage in the process as well. There's a lot that flows here that enables Kazuha to deal damage that doesn't necessarily show up as big PP damage.
And I can sleep undisturbed.
As for the builds, that is relatively simple. Kazuha is running 4 VV to debuff Cryo resistance. He is also running a Cryo Goblet with a traditional ADC build to further amplify his Cryo damage, along with giving himself his own buff when Cryo is swirled. Preferably, he should be running either Freedom Sworn or Iron Sting to double dip with the shattered damage and the Cryo damage he gives to himself along with the swirl. But Mistsplitter could potentially be good too. Yunjin will still simply run a Fav Lance and Triple Def Husk. Xinqiu will run the standard 4 Emblem or 2-piece Heart Adept 2-piece Noblesse with Sack Sword. And Chongyun will run 4-piece Noblesse with Sack Great Sword. This weapon is of great importance as it allows you to seamlessly do 2 rotations without having to worry about the 2 to 2.5 second downtime of Chongyun's E. Noblesse is a much needed attack buff, especially if you aren't using Freedom Sworn. Aside from Kazuha, the other units don't need that much of an unconventional build for this team to shine.
Clouds hide. The birds call.
The rotation for this team is relatively simple. You start off with Chongyun's burst to trigger Noblesse and apply Cryo. Then you use Kazuha's E to swirl, then use his burst to infuse with Cryo as well. Then you switch to Xinqiu to EQE, then switch to Yunjin to EQ. Determining whether or not Xinqiu or Yunjin is first in the rotation can be based on if you want to freeze enemies longer or if you want to maximize uptime of Yunjin's burst. Yunjin's skill and burst stagger enemies, so if the enemies are highly mobile like Hydro Heralds, you'd want to maintain freeze more by applying Hydro first before going to Yunjin. Chongyun then casts his E, and then finally switch back to Kazuha to normal attack and E when off cooldown. The only drawback in this rotation is that Cryo can be hard to swirl against certain enemies, like the Pyro Lecter that applies Pyro everywhere. The rotation can easily be executed again as long as you have around 180-200% ER on Yunjin, and 140-150 ER on Kazuha. Now in my account, Kazuha is C1 and thus it lowers my need for ER, and Sack Greysword plays a fundamental role as it allows you to cleanly enter the next rotation after the first Frost Field has ended.
Fallen leaves, adorn my night!
Much of what makes Cryzuha great is that it's just very fun to play. And depending on your account and how you want to play this game, it might never even be touched. It requires a C6 Yunjin that not many players may have. Cryzuha is mostly a team spawned out of necessity for me. If you don't have a decent freeze DPS build but have Chongyun, Kazuha, and even a low cons Yunjin, then this team can still work. The problem is that they're just bare alternatives. Kai is just a bare unit to use in this team against even a C6 Yunjin. And this team would probably perform better with Kai anyway. However, with running 2 Cryo units, or Blizzard Trader suddenly becomes a much more attractive option for Kazuha. However, this leads me to the point of Cryzuha and what this video is really about. People will dismiss these kinds of teams even if the synergy is present simply because they're better alternatives, and that is fine. But you can't deny that just by looking at this team and the very fact that everything comes together so smoothly and cohesively, and it allows you to clear this iteration of the Abyss at a pretty decent rate, it brings a smile to your face. It shows you that with a little creativity and thinking past what is most effective, there are teams that can do well even if it isn't conducive to the faster is equal to better meta. Cryzuha is a fun team, and that's all that matters to me. You can be happy to talk about Shangling, Bennett, and Xin Shou all your goddamn lives, and I'll be happy to talk about Cryzuha. There's usually a message I want to leave with Genshin Impact comps you've never heard of, because this series serves to highlight teams that otherwise would never see the light of exposure to other players simply because it does not provide the most damage per rotation or damage per screenshot. So tell me some teams that you use that you think deserve a spotlight in the eyes of other players down in the comments below, and who knows, it might give me an idea to make a video on them. Or better yet, come at me at twitch.tv/TheJimaMan, where I stream Genshin almost every day. Join the Slime Kingdom, Discord, where I feed you slime content every day. And this is our parting. Farewell.